Hi everyone, here's a very quick video on how to bake animations from your control rig to your deform rig so that they can be used to insert text keys and ultimately so that you can export your game rig, your deform rig, for use in game. Now my setup here is as I've shown you how to do in previous videos. I have a deform rig, that is a rig which the mesh is actually skinned to. Every bone in the deform rig has been duplicated, and on every bone in the deform rig there is a copy transform constraint pointing to the duplicate bones which exist in a control rig. That way I can make all my animations and I can use nice bone constraints such as IK splines, IK copy rotation constraints, etc. In the control rig without accidentally messing up the game rig or having to worry about movement constraints or deleting particular control bones which I've used but don't want to end up in the final exported rig. So I've made all my animations using my control rig, and as I'll show in future videos, you usually want to make your actions, your animations in the action editor. To get here, I've simply gone to the animation workspace up here. You'll usually be presented with Dope Sheet. To change the action editor, you want to click here and come down to Action Editor. Now, I've already got set up some animations that I've made. Here, for example, is a simple death animation. Didn't make it to the final cut, but fairly simple animation that I've made. Now, what I've done is I've made a complete set of animations and I've pushed them all down to the nonlinear action strip, the NLA strip. To do that, with each action, I've simply gone here and went push down. Now, those animations are then stored on the NLA strip. To access that strip, I want to come over here to editor type, click it, and come down to nonlinear animation. And you'll be presented with something like this, except that you won't have this long strip. Now the way this works is fairly easy. We have strips like this, and these individual black boxes are actions that we've pushed down. So for example, I have pushed down this death animation. I'm going to push it down onto the strip, and it's a black box now, and I can grab that box, I can move it from this strip, or I might want to move it down to this strip. And now what the idea is you push down each of your actions that you've made, and then you move them using G grab and line them up in a nice single strip. That way, when you play this strip, what will happen is every animation, every action in this strip will play. So if I click star here, only this strip which is starred will play, and you can see what I mean. Just going to flick through, but I've got every single animation I've made on this one strip. Now, when you're moving your actions around onto a single strip, a few things to know. One is when you press G, if your strip appears in red, that's because there's an overlap. So if you were to place it here, it would be overlapping with an action already placed. Whereas by contrast, if I move this to the end of the strip, it's in white because it's no longer overlapping. You can work out where to place your new actions, because if you click on this action, for example, I know that the end frame of this action is 80. So I could place this strip at frame 81. The frames are what is being represented by these numbers up here. You can obviously zoom in, see them more clearly. So we're lining up all of our actions onto this single strip. No real rules as to what order you put your actions in, except for one, which is have an idle animation as the very last action. You can see here I've put my simple hit star, I put my simple breathing animation here. It's an idle animation, which means the last frame and the first frame of this animation are the default idle poses which appear throughout nearly all of my animations. So how do we take this strip and then bake the animations to our game rig? That's super easy. Let's go into object mode. Let's hide our control rig and bring up our deform rig and go into pose mode. We want to select all of our bones using A, so they'll all be highlighted in blue. Then we want to come down to this NLA strip, and you notice it's currently empty. It's empty because I haven't actually made any animations, haven't pushed anything down for the deform rig. It's all been done on the game rig. And so instead, I want to show hidden so that I can see NLA strips that correspond to the control rig. Then I want to select, firstly star the strip which has all of the actions on, then hovering over, I pressed A there to select them all, so they're all in orange. And then last but not least, I want to come over to pose. Just going to move some things around so that I can actually click on it. Come over to pose, animation, and bake action. For settings, I want only selected bones, visual keying. Clear constraints is usually recommended. Do note though that that will sever the link between your control rig and your game rig. So if you wanted to further tweak animations, you'd have to reset up those copy transform constraints. And override current action. Bake data is typically for pose. The only time you'd really want it for object is if you were making a run cycle or a walk cycle, and rather than moving a root bone to move the rig forward, backwards, etc., instead you had moved the object armature, that is, the armature while in object mode. If you'd done that, then you'd probably also want to click object as well. I didn't. I've used a root bone, which I think is the easier way of doing it. So, final things, start frame and end frame should correspond to the first and last frame of your animations as you've lined them up on the strip. That's usually automatically done, but just double check before you bake them. And then that's it. Click OK. Now you notice for under the armature deform, my deform rig, my game rig, there's this new thing called action. I need to push it down by clicking push action down. And now all of my animations from my control rig have been copied over to my game rig. I can show you that because let's delete my control rig. Now I've only got the deform rig, so only the bones of the deform rig are left, so the control rig couldn't be having an influence over the deform rig. But if I were to press play, all of my animations work. They've been copied over from the control rig to the deform rig. Now the big caveat and how baking actions actually work. If I go to Action Editor and then select Action, that was that very long new action that's been created, I've got a sea of yellow. A keyframe has been inserted on every single frame for every single channel. That's why it's so messy and so difficult to modify animations once they've been baked, because whereas for a run cycle on a control rig I might be tweaking an animation on frame 10, frame 20. If I wanted to tweak it here and now, I'd have to tweak every single frame of the animation. It's just a big pain. So if you do want to make a tweak to an animation, have a saved backup before you baked, make those animations on the control rig and then rebake it. Much easier. Now you're nearly ready to go and we're nearly done. The last thing is that we've got an awful lot of keyframes here, and for some of our bones they won't be moving at all. The keyframe will be identical across multiple frames. Maybe for example my claws don't actually rotate except very rarely. In those circumstances, having all these keyframes is simply a waste. We can tidy this up and try and get rid of some of those duplicate keyframes, take up less memory. To do that, select all of the bones, all of the channels by being an action editor, having your action, that is the baked action we just created, all selected. Go into graph editor by coming over here, that is editor type, clicking graph editor, we want to have highlighted, so I've got here show hidden, we want to highlight all of our possible actions, and then we want to come to key, density, decimate allowed changes, and then we would select and enter a margin error of 0.001. When we do that, I'm not going to run it now on my laptop because it will probably crash because I've got a very slow laptop, but when we do that it will clear up some of the keyframes, delete a lot of the duplicates with a margin of error. The animations will still run as they should, it just means we're taking up less space. It's good practice. And then that's it. The next step, which I'll talk about in a future video, is adding text keys once you've baked your actions. But in short, that's how we take our animations we've made on a control rig, copy them over to a game rig, ready to add text keys and ready to export. For transparency, I'm using Blender version 4.1. I believe the process is identical for previous versions of Blender, but if you have any difficulties, just leave a comment and I will take a look. Thank you.